Hi, today's activity is one that requires zero prep and zero money, only time and books. And I know we never have enough of either of those, but we just do the best that we can. Today's topic is D.E.A.R, drop everything and read. And you may not know this, but Beverly Cleary is the one that we have to credit for giving us this beautiful term. It's one of my and my students' very favorite times of every day. And I do mine together. I have about a 50-minute block that I do first D.E.A.R, and then we transition into Read Aloud. So I've mentioned before the book Whisperer, and in that she challenges our students to read 40 books a year, and I've been doing that now for several years. And they don't have to take tests on it. They don't have to write reports on it. They simply have to read. And I'll show you the form that I use. And I don't know if this is something I should put on Teachers Pay Teachers for you for free. You can make this yourself. You are probably much more skilled than I am. Wonderful Stanley made this for me. But as you can see, they put the title of the book, the author, and then a score of 1 out of 10. And they always want to know, what do you mean a score? And it takes them a while because they're used to A.R scores, but that's their heart score. On a scale of 0 to 10, on 1 to 10, what would you rate this book? And I teach them that they need to be choosing books that they're getting 9s and 10s. If they're choosing 6 and 5s and 7s, I need to help them with book selecting so that they're choosing books that they really love. I also let them start with anything they have read from the previous summer, from June on. So many of the students will have, 6 books from the get-go, right from the beginning. And this doesn't count for their grade. I just tell them that we're going to read our brains out this year, and they have never failed me, and I keep one too. Last year, I read 38 books, and wonderful Stanley saw my list and he said, you didn't make the goal. And I, what are you talking about? I, an adult, read 38 books. That's incredible. So let me just tell you a little bit about how I do all this. I need to train my students that they need to start D.E.A.R right away. And if you have D.E.A.R after a recess, you will want to train your students to take out their books so that they're ready to go when you begin. And you might even have to set a timer. We will all be in D.E.A.R within the first 60 seconds, and then just keep decreasing the time so that it's like D.E.A.R time, boom, their noses are in a book. I also teach them this is not book selection time. Unless they finish a book in the middle of D.E.A.R, then they can go select another book. But you know that there are those little students who will want to spend their time perusing the library, and it's just a ploy. We don't fall for it. We're smarties. So that's something you have to watch for. And they're reading, hopefully, at their reading levels. But I don't limit it. I don't say, all right, you're level P on Fountainus and Pinnell, so you can only read level P. They can self-select the book. And oftentimes they ask for my help. And sometimes students will have to abandon a book if it's too challenging. And so we just say that's a not yet book. But, readers do have that right to abandon a book. They are not committed once they start to read that book. I wanted to show you my checkout system. You already have a checkout system that works beautifully in your classroom, and I know that there are even digital ways to check out books on phones. You can take a picture of it, but I do it in old school method, and I'm going to show you why. I make every year a chart like this, or I get that poster board, the thick one. I guess it's called foam core, and I write their names on a pocket, and then whenever they check out a book, they take out the little card and slip it in here. And then when they're finished, they replace, they write their name on it, they replace it, and put it on the in the reshelf bin. What I love about this is that every year I have students who have a little pocket who are not my current students, because I always have students in the the above grades who are still wanting to come to Mrs. Matsuda's room and check out a book. And I think that is a precious thing to me. But let me show you why I love this system. It's because it becomes a little history of who read the book. When I pick out this book, I can see, oh, and sometimes it's a student who I might look up to. A student may look up to and they think, oh, well, this person read this book. Maybe I should read this book too. David, this was his favorite book. Tim Green. I had my boys who are now 8th graders a couple years ago. I could not keep them in Tim Green books. I had to constantly be reading, buying them for them. But look what he wrote. He wrote David Chang. He wrote it once, it crossed it out, and then he read it twice. This book I would have never read. I'm not a sports person. Sadly, I'd like to be a sports person, but Mateo years ago came and he said, Mrs. Matsuda, you have to read this book. And I'm like, Mateo, it's football. No. And he said, no, I'm serious. You have to read this book. And I read this book, and I have reread it and reread it. It is an excellent book called Unstoppable by Tim Green. I also want to show you Guillermo. Guillermo read and fell in love with Blubber last year. This is my copy of Blubber from when I was young. You can see I have 2 newer copies, but I will never get rid of this one, and I'll show you why. Because in the circle right here, I don't think you can see it, but Guillermo said, Guillermo read this 5 times. He did. A couple times he read it immediately after, finishing it and starting right away. But then he would go back and read it after taking a break and reading something else. Do our students in things like A.R. do that? Will they do that? I don't know. But with this system, they do. They'll go back and reread books. And if they read the same book 5 times, they need to write it here 5 times. And I also count books that I read aloud to them. I count books that they listen to auditorily, or books that they're read alouds that their parents even do for them. And you will have students who get to 40 books by November. So obviously those students will not be reading 40. They'll be reading 140 books. Oh, I used and, don't tell Wonderful Stanley, 140 books. Another thing that I teach my students to do, and this is hard, and my university students, some of them really struggle. They'll say, Professor, I can't. It's just wrong. I can't do it. But little ones are a little more trainable, and that's to annotate. And by that I mean making marks, highlighting, underlining, writing phrases. I want my students to be thinking about what they're reading. How many of us will read an entire page before we realize, wait, what did I just read? Last year, my students went crazy for the Mr. Terep series. I've mentioned that to you before, and I have multiple copies of each of the 4 books. And this one is the final one, Goodbye, Mr. Terep. And Catherine, it was just the most incredible thing. My students read it before I could, because I bought it for them and they just stole it right out of my hands, essentially. And so it was a while before I got to read it myself. But Catherine said, Mrs. Matsuda, when you read it, I want you to read this one. I want you to read the one I read. I want you to read what I wrote. And she's not the only one who annotated this book. There are many different handwritings. But I just want to show you some of the things. I mean, I don't know, are you comfortable with this, with students writing in your books? And don't worry, they don't write in the library books. They know the difference between my books and Mrs. Benny's books. But Alexis in this book is always saying, whatever. And this student wrote, she always says that in the side. She just wrote, she always says that. Some of them write in pencil, some of them write in pen. Highlighting right here, I'm going to take the cover off. Highlighting and then a comment, so mean. Like, this is making meaning. I love this. I love annotating. It's how I understand as well. This is in a poem, and the student wrote, Jessica wrote this poem, and the student just wrote, love, love. This book is a little complicated, family-wise. There's so many, you'll see when you read it. Look what my student did. Made a family tree to understand who the characters are. After my brother Michael died, and this student wrote, wait, he died? See, this is the kind of deep meaning that can occur when we annotate. And I have lots of different examples of annotating, but I think you get the idea. So we do that, and I encourage the students to do that. What would happen if a book would become so marked up that it's illegible? Well, I would say thank you, students, and if need be, I'd go buy another copy of the book. That's how important it is to me that they annotate. Here's our binder. This is where we keep those forms that I showed you. A student made that for me, our 40-book binder. And I keep this at the front of the room, and students can either come to the front and record their books, or they can take it to their desk and record and just bring it back. Look at this student is already on book 13. That's a summer head start. And she's giving 10s to all her books. A lot of students are giving 10 pluses. But this one cracks me up. Look at these scores. 7.4, 9.4, 9.5. Really, really into decimals. This is the student who asked me at the beginning of the year to please challenge her mathematically. Oh yes, I will. This student, it's almost even a math assessment. Check this out. She wrote 10.0000. I think she thinks she's giving it extra scores, but what she doesn't know yet is that the decimal of 0.0 gives no additional value. So won't that be fun when we get to decimals and I'll get to pull out the 40-book binder to teach that lesson. Many students will complete both sides of this and need a new sheet, so I just keep extra copies right here, blank copies, so that they can just fill out another form. And again, I don't count this on their grade. I just keep pushing them and telling them we're going to read our brains out this year, and we do. But if you don't make that goal, you're not going to be penalized in any way. And by and large, they make the goal. What kind of books count? I really leave that up to them. You know, I want them reading at their level. I remember Jack. He has a younger brother, and, you know, reading to his younger brother every day. And so in the beginning, you know, he was writing things like Brown Bear, The Hungry Caterpillar, and that lasted about a week. And he realized, oh, this is exhausting to write down every single picture book I read to my baby brother. Another story I love is Renee. She's now a senior, but I don't know if you've seen those little American Girl doll books. They're not the books, they're like the little companion booklets. And she brought one. She was in the 5th grade at the time, and she said, Mrs. Matsuda, can I count this book? And I took it, I flipped through it, and I said, sure, Renee, it's really up to you. I think this would be fine. There's quite a lot of content. It's up to you. She took it back, flipped through it again, and she said, no, I'm not going to count this, and off she went. So you'll find that your students will rise to your expectation. I did have a student a couple years ago, though, who was in the beginning, and he honestly was a bit of a reluctant reader at the beginning of the year. And he was looking in the library, I'm not even kidding, and I know you have one of these in your room, for the shortest books in my library. And I caught him, you know, I saw him. And I said, that's not what this is all about. The goal is not to get quantity. You know, I'm not trying to be impressed by this. Just read what you like and what you love, and that's not the message. And for those reluctant readers, I'd like to introduce this series to you. There are 4. They're written by Steve Moore. There are 4 of these, and whenever I have my boys reading these, there are 2 more of these, excuse me. Whenever I have my boys reading these books, I always find them laughing and chuckling during D.E.A.R time. And I tell them they can laugh in D.E.A.R time, they can cry in D.E.A.R time, but they cannot talk, they cannot share. It is not a sharing time. What else did I want to tell you about D.E.A.R? I feel like there's something else. Let me just go look and see if I can find in my brain. Hold on. I remembered what it was. I just needed a moment to be by myself without you, just to think, and there the idea came. How do I accomplish all this time for Read Aloud and D.E.A.R? Well, I'm willing to dedicate this time. You know, you may think how do I have time to give them for all this Read Aloud and D.E.A.R? But really the question needs to be, how do I not? So I don't do any science and history during the week. And when I say any, I do it occasionally, but by and large, I save all my science and history for Fridays, and that's how we spend our Fridays, so that I'm only really focusing on language arts and math Monday through Thursday. And so I dedicate, it's about 50 to 60 minutes a day on Read Aloud and D.E.A.R. I try to do 30 minutes a day of D.E.A.R, and depending on your grade, that really is it dependent upon the age of your students. And start small, start with 10 minutes of D.E.A.R and just keep building up, and then we end the period with Read Aloud. And for this year, this is the first year I've ever done this, but I have it at the last hour of the day. And when it's the end of D.E.A.R time, I usually say something like, I hope you're in a good stopping spot, in a soft voice. And someone always says, no, I'm not. But then when we start D.E.A.R, they never want to stop that either. So it's a win-win. And I know we're just at the beginning of the year, but vacation time will be here soon. And my co-teacher, Mrs. Kendall, and I, for the last few years, have been doing the return back to school from Thanksgiving and Christmas, and she does it even for spring. I haven't done it for spring break yet, but I might this year. We have Read Aloud and D.E.A.R all day long, and we let them bring pillows and stuffed animals. The idea comes from my good friend Cindy Logan. She builds forts with blankets and all in her classroom for that, and I haven't ventured to that area, but it's something that the students love, and I'm hoping that I can share that idea with my school so that maybe a couple more teachers would like to have the return. I don't mean nobody wants to come back to school, but the difficulty of getting back into the gear, the swing of things after vacation, and what a beautiful thing to look forward to. So that is D.E.A.R. I hope that you are already doing D.E.A.R, and I hope that you've gotten a few more ideas of things you can do. I buy these little pockets from Amazon if you're interested. They have the self-stick and the ones that you just have to glue, and I get these little cards too. And if you are planning to ban this book this year for a Read Aloud, these play a big role in the climax of that book. So it's really an exercise in literacy as well. Until we're together again next week, I want to tell you a phrase that my student Noah taught me when he was in my class several years ago. His grandfather taught him this. He said, Noah, those who read, lead. Goodbye.